Hey everybody, welcome back to Alfred's Basic Adult Piano Course, Lesson Book Level 1. Today's video is Lesson 51. This is probably going to be a pretty short video. On page 58, we're just covering the topic about measuring sevenths and octaves. So these are our last two intervals that we're going to cover. You started out in the book learning about seconds and thirds, and eventually fourth, fifth, sixth, and today sevenths and octaves are going to finish it up. Just remember that an interval is the distance from one note to the next. And there are two types of ways to play intervals. There's melodic, when you play one note at a time, and harmonic, when you play both notes simultaneously together. So at the top of page 58, first we're going to talk about a seventh. And now they say when you skip 5 white keys, the interval is a seventh. So that's true. For example, I'm going to take my right hand starting on middle C. And so if I count 5 white keys between middle C, well, after middle C, let me count 5 white keys. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there's my seventh. So 5 white keys. You know, the other way to do it, of course, is starting on middle C, count that as your first note and just count up 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So from C to B, for example, is a seventh. Now, another way of looking at a seventh is actually looking at an octave first. So let me explain what an octave is, which is also at the top of page 58. They say when you skip 6 white keys, the interval is an octave. Well, really an octave, if you're focusing on white keys, is from, for example, C to C. That is an octave. Now, octave means 8. So if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's my octave. But I love looking at octaves on the piano. I think it's so easy because it's just C to C or D to D or E to E. So it's the same letter name for both keys. That's always an octave. So backing up for a second, a seventh is just shy of an octave by 1 note. So I use middle C as my foundation. So 7 up from middle C is going to be B. 1 note less than an octave. Okay? So if you're really good at octaves, again, I find octaves to be pretty easy because it's C to C. Just think 1 less key, and that'll put you on a seventh. On page 58, that first pink box on the left, sevenths are written line, line, or space, space. So when you're looking at a sheet of music, when you're looking at sheet music and you see line to line note like you see there, it's generally, pretty wide apart. That's going to be a seventh, as opposed to over on an octave, even though we said it's like the same key, C to C, but that's always going to be a line to a space. So for example, middle C is actually a line note, and this C in music is a space note. So part of me wants to say, well, when I look at a seventh, I'm thinking octave because C and C, that must be a line and a line. Doesn't work that way. So C is middle C again is a line note, but B is also going to be a line note. So it's actually line to line, or like I said, space to space. How important is it to know that? Not all that important. I mean, generally when we read music, I read that as middle C and that as a B. But it still can be useful. It still can be handy. So it's just another tool in the toolbox when learning notes, learning to read music. Underneath the pink boxes, say the names of these intervals as you play. So we're in the right hand. These are melodic intervals, so 1 note at a time. And these are all measured from middle C. So in our very first measure, our thumb is on middle C, and we're going up a second, which is the very next key, D. In the next measure, we're going back to middle C and going up a third. But notice the fingering here. They've chosen to use 2 on E. Now, part of that, we talked about in previous lessons, is fingering isn't so much about where you're at in the moment, it's about where you're going. Now, our goal at the end of this line is an octave. So putting 2 on E shifts these fingers closer to the octave. If I do 3 on E, look where my pinky is, and I got it way up here. So it's all about preparing you for where you're going. So that's second measure again is 1 on C, 2 on E. Now the third measure, C to F, is a fourth. And then our next measure, a fifth, is C to G. Notice fourth finger on G. Now, anytime you play a 6, well, at least for now, you can guarantee it's going to be the thumb and 5. In this case, thumb on C, A on, a fifth finger on A. Same thing with a 7th. It's going to be thumb and 5. 1 and 5. C and B for the 7th, and an octave, of course, also. First finger, fifth finger. Okay? So you're going to want to go through that a few times and, do honor the fingering that they've provided. Of course, 4/4 time, half notes, so you want to make sure you can do this in a steady rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. The line underneath that is just doing the same thing, but harmonically, harmonic intervals. They've also made them whole notes, so you've got 4 beats. So you got a little bit more time to hold these out before, changing to the next interval. So C and D together, harmonic second on the first measure. Notice the fingering on measure 2. It's so easy to just play C and E with 1 and 3. We've done this in the past. But again, shifting that 2 to E shifts all of my other fingers up to notes that I'm about to play. So make sure it's 1 and 2 on the harmonic third. Make sure it's 1 and 3 on the 4th. And 1 and 4 on the 5th. And then naturally it's going to be 1 and 5 on the 6th, on the 7th, and finally the octave. Okay, your third line down the bass clef. Let's do this with the left hand. So we're going to start in the C position down here with your 5th finger on C, and we're going to play a melodic second. So that puts 4 on D. Now, unlike the treble clef, the fingering here stays pretty natural. So in the second measure, 5 on C and 3 on E for our third. So there's no switching to 4, because if you do a pinky on C and a 4th finger on E, you can feel those fingers are very weak and they don't like that stretch. So in the right hand, it makes sense. You've got your thumb to work with. You can really stretch. Pinky, not so much. So the third measure in the bass clef is C, 2 on F. That's our 4th. And then we have our 5th, which is 5 and 1. And then 6, 5 and 1. 7th, 5 and 1. And our octave, 5 and 1. So it's the same pattern, you just played in the right hand, but it feels a little different because left hand fingering is different. And then you're going to do the same thing on the bottom line, harmonically. Same fingering. So you're going to start with D and C together, playing 4th and 5th finger together. Second measure, you're going to play a 3rd. And then your 4th measure, I'm reading these wrong. 3rd measure, you're going to play a 4th. The next measure, you're going to play a 5th. And then 6th, 7th, finally the octave. So that basically covers it for this lesson, reviewing old intervals, both melodic and harmonic, and adding the 7th and the octave. Which really, 7th and octave, when it comes to fingering, it's always going to be 5 and 1 or 1 and 5, depending on which hand. And like I said, think of an octave as C to C, or D to D, or E to E. It's the same letter. Think of a 7th as 1 note shy of an octave. Instead of counting up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, think of an octave and just come down 1 note. There's your 7th. So a couple other ways to look at 7ths and octaves. So obviously get comfortable with that, because they're going to use it probably on the next page, which is our next lesson. It's going to be lesson 52, Cafe Vienna, and look forward to seeing you there.